You guys having a good time?
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Stryperdrive, and I'm one of your hosts, Kent, along with my co-host
Rex.
and we're happy to be back and just want to thank everybody who gives us the time of day. And this episode, friends, we're talking about an album in Stryper's catalog that's always just been a bit controversial for varying reasons. We're talking about Against the Law, of course. You know, Rex and I, we're just going to go through and just kind of give our personal perspective and assessment. I know that, and Rex, you correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to go through. It's really weird. Friends, something I want you to know is that Rex and I, when we do these episodes, we do them well in advance. They are recorded and they're not released until maybe a month later or, you know, several episodes down the road. So, Rex, I always find it interesting that you and I have had ideas and stuff. And in fact, this was one of the first ideas that you and I had put down even before our first episode of Stryperdrive was an Against the Law discussion episode. And then it's really weird because I have seen sometimes, of course, Stryper members or people on other channels, they, in their discussions or something, they will touch on topics that, you know, we've talked about. It's like this synchronicity or something in the air or something. But friends, we've had this episode. We've been talking about this for quite a while, doing an Against the Law episode, and I'm glad it's finally here. I don't know when this will be released. But Rex, on August the 21st of 2020, Michael Sweet, on his Facebook page, he put out his thoughts about this album. And a day or two after that, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Oz Fox also put out his assessment of the album. My take from that is that I believe Oz, musically speaking, Oz put this album in high regard, high favor with him. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yes. You could tell there were, you know, because everyone's memory or take on things is different. So you could tell there was a different opinion between Michael and Oz, I think, kind of of the album as a whole even, which is kind of cool to see their, you know, differing opinions about that.
Exactly. I remember the gist of Oz's post. I did not copy that one down verbatim. I did copy Michael's down because it spurred a lot of thoughts with me, as did Oz. I remember years ago, Tim Gaines, the band's former bassist, him making a statement that with Against the Law, Oz Fox became his guitar hero. And man, you know, certainly I agree with that. I mean, Oz, Michael too, but you know, Oz, I remember Oz having some with In God We Trust. He was kind of having maybe a dry spell, and you remember Tony Palacios from Guardian, and Oz and Tony were good friends, and Oz kind of holding his chops a little bit with Tony, and Against the Law came out, and man, Oz was just shredded on that album. So let's just kick this off, Rex. I'm going to just read some of this from Michael's assessment of Against the Law. Interject with anything that you want to.
Okay.
And then we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of this album. Michael said on August the 21st of 2020, he said 30 years ago today, Against the Law was released. He said, you all already know how I feel about this album, but I at least wanted to clarify a few things so you know why I feel the way I do. He started out by saying, first, amazing production. Yep. Amazing production. Tom Worman and Eddie Delana did an outstanding job. Again, amen to that. He says some good things about Tom, and he also said that we, Michael, as Stryper, contributed quite a bit to the actual sound and production of this album. And Michael said, overall, it's a great sounding album without question. I concur wholeheartedly with that last statement.
Yes, I do too.
Michael goes on. He mentioned some great things about Jeff Scott Soto. I'm familiar with him, great vocalist. Michael says, I've always voiced my opinion of this album, and it's not always positive. I feel that the band changed too much in the process and lost track of who we were and who we should have been. We were going through a very rough stage in our lives, and I think that this translated over to the music and the message as well. Without getting too deep into that right here, I just want to say that, I'm roughly 10 years behind in age of Stryper, of the members. Me being behind them roughly 10 years in age, I just want to say that going through that rough stage and this translated over to the music and message, as Michael says, I just want to say that I understand that. And as I've only grown older and have been through some life hardships as we grow older and experiences, which aren't always pleasant, I totally understand that. How it translates over. Music is an outlet. It's a healthy outlet. You're not harming anybody per se. I mean, you could with your message, but we'll get into the message in a little bit. I understand what Michael's saying here, and the guys just needed to blow off some steam. We'll get into that more in depth. Anything to say right now or add to that, Rex?
Well, just, without getting too, involved, you got to remember they had at least 5 years of taking nonstop criticism from both sides. So you can see where they would become frustrated just as a whole. And you can see why they would call the album that and whatnot. So, but we'll get into that more in our discussions. But you can understand where they were coming from, I think,
Sure.
with all of that.
And to add to that, I mean, we're talking 89 when it was recorded, the recording process, remember invitation only. And so 89, 90, I mean, the guys were young. Stryper were still young men back then.
Yes.
Anyway, Michael goes on to say, Against the Law took us down a different path. We changed everything that we were, and we seemed to run from anything that was a reminder of the past, from our tone to our clothing, our style, our lyrical content, our message, our attitudes, our lives, everything. I understand when you're, again, with these life experiences, just touching on it really quick, when you're browbeat by somebody, and I'm speaking here of the religious crowd, and I want to make a distinction, as I always do. When I say religious, I'm not talking about genuine Christian people, Christ followers. I'm talking about religious, which is man-made stuff, not simply people who love Christ, who are Christians. So they were taking heat from the religious crowd and the mainstream crowd. For various reasons, when you're browbeat by people or a group of people, you're naturally not going to have good sentiments toward them. And then soon you need to blow off some steam, So Michael goes on to say, I've even heard a few people say that that's why they like this album, because it's not a Christian album in their opinion. And then Michael says, and that's all the more reason why it bothers me. We were always a band that set out to proclaim Christ and deliver a powerful, life-changing message, and do so with a very special original sound. Against the Law did not contain that musically or lyrically for the most part. I just want to say really quickly with that, I really appreciate Michael's words there. I still see a lot of good and a lot of biblical stuff in this album. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But it just, seeing Mike's heart about it all, man, that's cool. That it bothers him that people said that they like it because it's not a Christian album. I mean, anyway, I just appreciate Michael's words there. Anything to say right there, Rex?
Yeah, you can see why he would, not like that even more when he would hear people say that, because, you don't want people to like it because it's not what they perceive as, a Christian, album by the band. That would even make you even more, sad about it, or not want to talk about it even more because of that. And especially because what they stand for, and that's what they want to, that's what they do. Michael says they love the Lord, and so that would make you even more disappointed in that album because of that.
Michael says, I always use the comparison that it would have made a great Van Halen album. There were just too many similarities, and we went from sounding like Stryper to sounding more like Van Halen. Michael says, now I am the biggest Van Halen fan on the planet, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that I feel we walked too far away from who we were originally. We're Stryper, not Van Halen. So on that note, I do have from a fan's perspective, maybe a bigger disagreement with Michael's words there. And Rex, we're small potatoes. Stryperdrive, we're not affiliated with Stryper. We're just two fans. And small potatoes, the Stryper guys, they might not ever see a single episode. But for any of the Stryper fans who are watching this, I just want to say, or for any Stryper members who might ever come across this, I'm about to argue for something, for an album that's Stryper. So I'll take the heat, but just remember, if I have any differences of opinion, I am simply making arguments for this album, why this album was good, in my personal opinion. So with Michael saying that the whole thing sounds like a great Van Halen album, I respectfully disagree. Just touching on the tip of the iceberg right now, there are only 2 songs on this entire album that distinctly remind me of Van Halen. So 2%. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. I'm just want to, but I will say, as a fan, I never once, when I first heard this album, say, oh, these sound like Van Halen clones. Stryper sounds like Van Halen clones. I never got that. Maybe you did, Rex. I don't know.
No, I mean, and I think he made a big general statement about that, and I agree with you. At most, 20% of the album would sound like that. But you can maybe see what he's talking about. But yeah, I would kind of disagree with him about that. The whole album is a Van Halen sounding album. I would not agree with that either. But like you said, there are a couple songs that you're like, oh yeah, I could see where maybe that sounds like Van Halen. But I'm like you, I did not listen to the album and go, man, that just sounds like, Van Halen. I knew it was different, but that wasn't really the thought that came to my mind.
Right. So yeah, we're in agreement, and we'll get to those songs here in a little bit, like you said. And Michael goes on to say about it, he said, that's why this album, Against the Law, just doesn't do much for me. There are a few songs that are some of my favorites within our catalog. Songs like All for One, Two Bodies, Lady, Caught in the Middle. Man, that's a nice little chunk right there. That's 4 songs from Michael's perspective. And man, all those are great songs. I'm privileged I had a chance to see them in concert where they did Caught in the Middle, and they did All for One and Lady. And man, great stuff. Michael says those are some really great songs, and those songs in particular are a little more like the way things should have sounded. He says, again, my opinion. My argument against that is, meaning I am all for those 4 songs, but to me, those 4 songs just fit in with the rest of the songs. I mean, it was a fluid, wonderful album.
Let's get busy!
So, again, I'm arguing for this album. Michael says, I know that Against the Law is a favorite for some people and fans, but once again, I have to always bring up the point that amongst most, it's not. If it were, it would have charted higher, sold more, and the stats would show that. They don't. It's that simple. What I'd like to bring up here, Rex, is that I can't argue with the stats, and I'm not arguing with Michael. What we have to remember, though, this is something that I just simply wonder if this was taken into consideration about Against the Law and the reason for the low stats. Stryper is very unique. Their fan base spreads wide. They have diehard mainstream fans. I mean, certainly quite a bit in the mainstream back in the day that were fans, and they also had fans from the Christian base, and so they were very diverse, amongst bands about that, having that distinct blend. Now, here's a point I'd like to make. These stats, Rex, I think a lot of people from the Christian-based crowd, whereas the mainstream crowd, they generally are just tuned into the music, meaning this just simply has to sound good musically. And a lot of them don't pay attention to the lyrics. Whereas I think the Christian-based crowd, not only does it have to sound good, but also under the microscope is the lyrical content, where the Christian-based crowd, a lot of people feel like it has to say the Lord's name in every other line, so to speak.
Yes.
Am I making sense there?
Yes. And I want to add about the whole stats thing and everything. We have to remember the time that this came out. And we also have to think about Enigma Records. I think roughly about a year and a half later, they go bankrupt. And I think probably Stryper was their bread and butter. And
I thought you were going to say bed and breakfast.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm sure that they were their biggest selling band on their label. And I'm just wondering too if they could see that they were running into some financial issues. And I know they came out with 3 videos. We'll talk about that. But, the music thing was changing. And that style of music was starting to, run its course a little bit. I think some of it was all a timing thing, and doesn't have anything to do with like the music itself. I just think, it it wouldn't have mattered. And I don't know the whole charting position in sales, but I do think sales were affected, like you said, because the lyrics did not say, you know, Jesus and, you know, go to church and all of that. It was a lot more vague, or whatever you want to call it. I just think, yeah, that time for music was really in a transitional period. And I think that's part of the reason why that album did not sell. And of course, all the changes that were done with their image, it kind of did not work, as we saw too. I think that was another factor, with so drastically changing, you know, the yellow and black, the Stryper insignia on the album too. You know, that I don't think helped.
I just to play point and counterpoint with you, Rex. I don't. Back in 1990. Now, this is just my opinion and my assessment. Back in 1990, I feel like that genre was still in full swing. It wasn't until 91 that Nirvana came out with Nevermind. And then you had Firehouse, ironically, you know, Perry's former band, that in 92 they won one of those, you know, an award for it was the best new artist in the hard rock metal category. So that was still in 92. And I just don't, the way, and maybe I'm wrong, but my perspective is, because Stryper had a mass fan base here on the mainstream side and a mass fan base here on the Christian side, I think a lot of people from this side, the Christian side, I think it was, you know, lyrically they were so concerned because where does it say God in this album? And a lot of times Christians are hyper focused on the lyrics, which I'm not saying they're not important. And sometimes that's what, sometimes Christians can get into the religious department then. You know, if it doesn't say just what they want it to say. We'll get into the lyrics and examine those more in depth, but I think that lyrically, because I remember seeing in the magazines, there was spreads and stuff about Christian magazines, you know, has Stryper gone secular? And you know, I heard it around the horn from people from Chatter and stuff. And anyway, I think a lot of it was some of the people kind of got on the religious kick again, and it didn't say what they wanted it to say, and therefore Stryper was, oh, well, they never were Christian and all that stuff. Anyway, we'll get more into that. So Michael goes on to say, regardless, Against the Law is an album that we released, and it certainly has its place. I guess what it always reminds me more of when I listen to it are the things that we should not do, the mistakes that we should not repeat. I recall all of our marriages suffering and a lot of things that were going on within the band that I would never want to see happen again. And due to those circumstances, I would never want to repeat anything remotely close to that ever again. I appreciate those words. I think, Rex, and I can relate on a smaller degree, me being in a little small potatoes local Christian band, I think that there's a mindset association now. The band was going through some bad times, and so a lot of this material simply conjures up those images again, and it's a place you don't want to go in your headspace. I can relate to that personally on a smaller scale. So, you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that is it. A lot of it, too. It just reminds them of all the, you know, the tough times, the rough times, or just the mistakes that they made with giving in to the record label to change. And I just think that brings just all those memories back, and also just adds another negativity to that album with them. which is understandable. I mean, I agree. You know, there are either, you know, albums or music, if you're going through a tough time, that kind of remind you of that when you hear them songs still. So
Sure.
I totally can understand that. I mean, you know, that I get that.
Right. And I just want to concede that, you know, as much as we'll talk about why I like this album, it's Stryper's choice. If they never play another song from Against the Law again, I understand. You know, I'm not trying to sound like I'm arguing against Michael. What I'm actually simply doing is arguing for Against the Law and giving my reasons why. So anyway.
Hey guys, can you get this sometime this year? Okay.
Rex, we'll get into the songs one by one and our assessments. Do you want to just kind of give your overall impression of this album, your general take of when you first heard it, and just your overall general thoughts about Against the Law and your history with it?
Sure. You know, it of course was totally different. You know, you see that cover, I'm just like, wow, you know, this is something totally different from Stryper. I did notice that it was, yeah, produced by Tom Werman, which he's done everything from Dokken, Motley Crue, Poison, Ted Nugent. Yeah, you look at the back of that, you're like, that is like not what I'm kind of expecting. But I'm like, hey man, those guys, they look like they mean business though, you know. I'm like, hey, that's cool, you know.
I thought
And
the prison stripes were a nice touch, though, you know, and I
yeah,
just now kind of thought about this because hindsight's 2020. I don't know if there was any thought to this, but the prison stripes was a nice touch, but I'm wondering if they were trying to give an image from all the heat they were taking that they felt like prisoners by some people and their thoughts, you know?
yeah. And with that title, Against the Law, it's like you could just see like almost like a rebellion image or something, you know, with all of that and the cover and like you said, the whole in the jail cell there. Um, you know, when I played it for the first time, you know, I was like, man, this is I liked it, you know. I mean, I was like, you know, cool. I was just out of college that year. Um, so, you know, I love Stryper. And I think out of those first 5 albums, I know I'm probably going to take some heat from this, but I feel that is the best produced album, even more than To Hell with the Devil. That thing rocks even to this day. You play that now, 30 years, and that production is still, it is not dated at all. That does not sound dated one bit,
Right.
like some of the other older albums. Um, I don't know what all you want me to get into exactly. Um, it, if you want me to give where I think it fits into the total Stryper discography, in my opinion, I don't know if you want me to give a number or whatever, but it's definitely in my top 5 of all the Stryper albums. Even the with the newer album, even The Devil Believes, it's still in my top 5. And I did notice that the lyrics were, yeah, a little bit more, you know, I don't know, mainstream, vague, didn't have Jesus and God and Lord in every single one of them. But, you know, I was okay with that. I thought they were trying to even reach more people by maybe being a little bit less vague and just trying to get their message out to even more people. I could never understand really, and I still can't really to this day, I can't understand all the controversy with the album as a whole. I don't get it. To me, it is a different sound than the first 4 albums. But I just could never, I know they changed that whole image and the stripes and all that, the yellow and black, but I just was like, I just took it like, hey, they're trying a different change. And of course, you know, that kind of really didn't work at the time, but I thought the songs were incredible. I mean, they're right up there with anything from the first 4 albums. So that's kind of my initial impression and what I thought about it.
Very cool, and I agree with you, and I'll give my initial overall impression first, but it's definitely in my top 5, like it is with you. My overall take of it, musically speaking, Rex, I mean, I was impressed with Stryper since 1984's Yellow and Black Attack album. As impressed as I was with Yellow and Black Attack in '84, it was enough to make me a lifelong Stryper fan. You know, at that time during the band's classic years, I was never more musically impressed with Stryper than I was with Against the Law, especially coming off the heels of In God We Trust. We'll get into that topic maybe some other time. Stryper, man, they were just pulling out all the stops with Against the Law. The album, it smokes from top to bottom. If it was musically influenced by Van Halen, as Michael contends, and I don't dispute, especially by way of Not That Kind of Guy, that's the main song.
Yeah.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of Oz's main contributions to the album. It certainly has that Hot for Teacher comparison. I mean, it's there in the beat. It's there with the, guitar play and all that. So, yes, that's the one song that automatically said, hey, man, that reminds me of Hot for Teacher. So, you know, the other song, Rex, I mentioned 2 songs. Ordinary Man. The song Ordinary Man in its introduction. Dun, 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 dun. Wonderful, wonderful introduction. You know, and I remember Tim's bass. You know, you could actually hear Tim's bass on this album. It was Tim playing. Do, 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 do. Anyway, wonderful song, Ordinary Man. Ironically, Ordinary Man, the introduction. Dun, 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 dun. Yes, that reminded me to a smaller degree of Van Halen, but it was actually the song Summer Nights that it reminded me of from 5150.
Yeah, yeah.
At any rate, those 2 songs, if the album was musically influenced by Van Halen, as Michael contends, and I don't dispute, but Stryper, to me, as the listener and an avid fan, Stryper certainly did not come off as sounding like Van Halen clones. Conversely, Rex, the song Two-Time Woman, which I really dig, the introduction of Two-Time Woman, da, 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 that always reminded me of Shake Me by Cinderella. If you ever listen to the song Shake Me by Cinderella, the introduction to that, my mind, for whatever reason, automatically, when I first heard that, I'm like, reminds me of Shake Me by Cinderella. Do I think Stryper were trying to copy Cinderella? Shoot, no.
No.
But what I'm saying is that, I mean, I don't think Stryper was even influenced by Cinderella. I don't know. They were certainly on the scene before Cinderella, but all I'm saying is you're always going to have songs. It's a small world. You're just always going to have songs in your chord progressions with the way music works in music theory that are going to come across reminding you of other songs. Yes, sometimes you are directly influenced and maybe you're paying a little homage to another artist or song, but sometimes songs just have a way of reminding you of other songs. I mean, I could point to to Rat, their introduction to Scene of the Crime. There's a song on Paul Stanley's solo album when he was with Kiss. I mean, he is with Kiss, but when it was the Kiss Paul Stanley solo album, there's a song by Rat, Scene of the Crime. It reminds me of the introduction to one of Paul's songs on his solo album. Anyway, so back to my overall impression. If Against the Law sounds more like a Van Halen album, then it's certainly a wonderful homage to a band which helped influence various Stryper members. But I don't think the whole album sounds like a carbon copy of Van Halen. As Michael contends, you know, if that influence sound is the worry that Michael has, I mean, I could point to 2011's The Covering album, which is, it's chock full of bands and songs which influenced various Stryper members. Stryper does faithful renditions of the cover songs. With Against the Law and its sound, Rex, my overall impression, I just simply thought at that time that Stryper were kicking things up a notch in 1990. Granted, not that kind of guy, reminded me of Hot for Teacher, though never once did I think, hey, this whole album called Against the Law, it totally reminds me of Van Halen.
The only way I think that the whole album reminds me of Van Halen is the background vocals. To me, if you wanna do any kind of comparison, the background vocals is probably the only thing to me as a whole. You know, I'm making kind of a general statement about it, but that would be the only thing that would remind me of Van Halen. Totally with Against the Law album. There's a lot of good background vocals on Against the Law, which might make you think of Van Halen possibly. That's where I go with that myself, but
and that's cool. And Rex, I mean, and that's the beauty of it. That's your perspective. I've never picked up on that. So I'm not discrediting you because, you know, you have a listening experience and I do too. I've just never, yes, I automatically thought of Van Halen when I heard Not That Kind of Guy. I automatically, yes, to me, Ordinary Man has a just a tinge of Van Halen-esque in its intro, but for me and my listening experience, those are the only two songs, and I don't think that two songs does a carbon copy make. Just my opinion, you know.
Right.
We each have our respective listening experiences, and anyway. So nonetheless, you know, love or hate Against the Law, man, I just felt like the album smoked from top to bottom. Rex, in my opinion, Michael Sweet's voice today, his rich timbre, he still has the screams. He has a gruffness now. I mean, all that in a great way. I've always loved Michael's voice. In my opinion, his current voice timbre, it started right there in 1990 with the Against the Law album. There was In God We Trust and everything before. I noticed that richer timbre to Michael's voice. And there was a bit of gruffness to it now that I hadn't ever heard, and yet he could still hit those piercing screams. That all started for me. I first noticed that in 1990. I said, hey, there's something a little different here. And I'm digging it because it didn't sound like the vocal delivery on In God We Trust.
And I would agree with you. You know, not that those prior albums are bad with him singing.
Right.
And Michael has even said he can't really stand to listen to those earlier albums now. And I understand why. And I totally agree. From Against the Law forward, his voice changed, and for the better. And for those exact reasons that you said, that, yeah, I like his voice from Against the Law on. It is better.
And then, you know, continuing on with overall assessments, you know, Oz and Michael, man, they got the let out on guitar. Tim's bass was featured in the mix. And he sounded great. Now, granted, Randy Jackson from Journey back in their 86 period and later on of American Idol fame, he played fretless bass on Shining Star, the Earth, Wind, and Fire cover. Think about it, Rex. Tim Gaines, I don't want to misspeak. If I'm not mistaken, though, fans, correct me if I'm wrong out there, fans of the band, I think that Michael had laid down the bass to Yellow and Black Attack, and then Tim came back and, like on Loud and Clear, he embellished some parts. I'm thinking, though, if I'm not mistaken, that Michael had actually laid down the bass on Yellow and Black Attack. Tim did play bass on Soldiers Under Command, but the bass was buried in the mix. Of course, Tim was not on for whatever reasons. He didn't play bass on To Hell with the Devil or In God We Trust. So this is actually the first Stryper album in 1990 that we actually get to hear Tim's bass. I'm not making any aside comments or getting involved in anything now from the band's past. All I simply want to say is I thought the bass sounded really good on this album. It was a great mix. Robert, he continued to crush those drums like he always did on this album. The tougher image and muscular musical tone of this album, the band's overall image, comparing it with In God We Trust, everything in the 80s, man, was just blown to excess. Stryper were no exception. I'm talking about the 88 In God We Trust album with all of its overproduction, with the band's image and everything on the cover. The tougher image presented on Against the Law and the muscular musical tone that Against the Law possessed, I'm just going to say it. Give me that over the In God We Trust era vibe any day. That's just my preference. Rex, your thoughts there?
Yeah, as a whole, pretty disappointed in the production of In God We Trust. And Michael has said he tried to make a clone of To Hell with the Devil with that album. But I would, and I think it'll happen, but I would love to hear a better production of those songs. It's not the songs themselves, I don't think, for the most part. They just produced that, and it just took all the punch out of it. And like you said, To Hell with, or Against the Law with Tom Werman, man, that thing smoked anything. I mean, you could play that right up with Queensryche, those albums that came out at that time. I mean, yeah, it was right there with all those bands, production wise and just songwriting wise. And yeah, it just has a punch that I was glad to see come back from In God We Trust.
Totally agree, buddy. I was actually just so proud of, speaking musically, I was just so proud of that album. Like, man, the guys were taking no prisoners with this. I still feel that way about it. Again, the by the number selling stats really quick. Michael contends the least selling album. During this time of pre-social media, Rex, back in 1990, I did on magazines and stuff. I heard a lot of Stryper sold out, or people were saying, well, Stryper were never Christians, or Stryper's gone secular. Stryper was under the microscope from both the mainstream and the religious crowd. Again, my perspective is that they had a lot of expectations placed on them, from the religious crowd especially, and from a lyrical standpoint. I've got to see the Lord's name every other line, or else. A lot of people with the religious, from the religious side, I hate to say this, but I feel like they had that mentality. I think a lot of their criticism at this time was probably mostly from the religious crowd. And Rex, I can't help but think that that is the main thing that contributed to the low sales. The music was outstanding. The performance, the production. I'm thinking that it was mostly the religious crowd that said, "Oh, what is this? You know, it doesn't say the Lord's name." And this is the critics' ignorance at the time, or their misunderstanding of what was being said lyrically. Now, Rex, I'll give you the floor here in a second, but what I'd like to move on to after you have the floor is let's talk about lyrically speaking. For as bad or unchristian as some have made this album out to be, I'd like to get into the songs and we can really examine what's being said in the songs. But before we do that, what are your thoughts from the stuff we've just talked about?
I think you're probably right. Unfortunately, the religious or Christian folks, you know, what they're expecting to see, and you look at that album and you know, you would be like, well, I can't tell they're Christians, or you know, and like you say, and if they buy it and they listen, you know, and you're expecting to hear "I love the Lord" and "Jesus is the way" and all of that, that was not really in that album. But yeah, there are some positive messages in those songs that we'll get into, but probably, yeah, they did not sell well in the Christian market. Because of that, I would agree.
I also found it interesting. You mentioned something earlier, and before I forget, you know, you're talking about the guys being behind bars and all that. Yeah, they were probably felt like they were being held prisoner. And, you know, it's against the law. I mean, you know, it was against the people's law, people in general, you know, that were locking them up. I did find it interesting, you know, there's that one picture where Robert, he's holding the key, a set of keys. He's got a key in his hand and the door is open. You know, they're set free. Let's get into the songs then, Against the Law. Do you want to start in with that song or do you want me to say anything?
You know, I looked at those lyrics and yeah, I mean, they're talking about man's law. You know, if you go down through all them, I didn't really write down a lot about lyrics exactly, but I did look at all the lyrics and was trying to get like a broad thing of like, you know, how these are compared to the other album's lyrics. This one is fairly direct about, yeah, what they're thinking they're being expected of the religious folks or whatever you want to call it, and what they're saying, hey, we're not, you know, and we're going to be against that. So if people could figure that out, and you know, it's the first song on the album, so you kind of can. They're trying to tell you right from the get-go, hey, this is where we're coming from, and you know, I don't. Maybe people just didn't pick up on that too with the whole thing with that album.
Exactly. I mean, man, my assessment of this song, Against the Law, it was the band blowing off steam from having to deal with the pressures meted out by some religious people, not Christian, but religious. It's understandable. We're human. And after years of fighting the good fight, Stryper, they finally grew weary of being beaten down from those supposedly on the same side. Rex, we all have to vent from time to time. You take it and you take it and you hold it all in, and guess what? It becomes like a splinter. And if you don't vent it, if you don't get it out, it's going to sit there and fester and boil and get infected. And that's what Stryper finally had to do. After years of the browbeating, they finally had to vent. In this song, Against the Law, there's no cussing. I'm not pretending that Stryper doesn't cuss. You know, Michael we're human. You know, I say things that I wish I didn't sometimes or whatever. But there's no cussing involved in this song. There's no name calling. It's just basically a confession of how they were feeling. But the lyrics also go on to say, and here's a tidbit, we've still got the fire burning in our souls. And for any religious people out there right now, he's not talking about the fire from below. He's talking about the holy fire. So let's, anyway, I understand the song. The guys are just needing to vent. And brother, I have been, you know, my former life path back when I was in the ministry. I remember doing some church youth camps and stuff, and I got in trouble because so-and-so over here, this adult thought I shouldn't have said this and shouldn't have sung this song. I mean, we're talking about Christian stuff. There's no pleasing people. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, it will make a person agitated. I'm just saying I understand the song Against the Law. My impression as a listener, as a fan, it's the guys blowing off some much needed, you know, much needed blowing off of steam.
Well, and let's think about this. You know, for 5 years, you're being told from the secular side you're too Christian, and from the Christian side you're being told you're too secular, or even worse, you're, you know, wolves in sheep's clothing and all of that garbage. And, you know, let's think about that. And you're trying your best, you know, your heart is for the Lord, and you're getting really squeezed from both sides. No one is pretty much in your corner for the most part. You can see where you know, that would just wear on you after a while. And
Sure.
you do just got to say, hey guys, okay, here it is. So.
Yep. So I understand that song, man. Two-Time Woman. You want to say anything about that one?
I love the music, and I mean, here again, it's not really, you know, gonna have, how I hate using this term, Christian lyrics, but you know, it tells a story, and you know, about a lady and a guy, and you know, he's not going to take that with a woman doing that, being unfaithful. I think that's okay to still tell write a song like that, and not to have, you know, God in the lyrics, or, you know, whatever. You got to be mature enough to see where that song is, what it's talking about.
Exactly. Two-Time Woman, my take. Just reading some lyrics here. Then I caught you as someone else. That's the end of the show. I've got to say no, girl, just go. Two-Time Woman, don't come back. An individual realizes his girlfriend or significant other isn't faithful and knows she's not the one he needs to be with. There is nothing wrong with that. If somebody's being unfaithful to you from the get-go, you don't need to be with them, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No.
You know, that's good advice.
Yeah.
If somebody's running around on you behind your back, man, you don't need to be with them. So
exactly.
That's great advice. Just my take. Rock the people, Rex. You want to rock the people right now?
Yeah. You know, pretty much that's a autobiographical song, I think, of the band. It's a fun, I think, good song. And, you know, I don't have lyrics in front of me, but I just remember that, oh yeah, they're just talking about, you know, I think Michael says from the time he was a kid or something, you know, and wanting to rock in that. And so just, yeah, good song about, you know, living for the Lord and rocking for the Lord, as I take it.
Yeah, it's a very simple and direct song, and it's simply a tale, as Michael spins it, you know, of one knowing what their calling is in life. Some people find their life's path as plumbers, and Firefighters, construction workers, policemen, teachers, doctors. Michael says, man, I was born to be a musician. No crime in that, right? I mean, that's fine. So, you know, good song. How about Two Bodies, One Mind, One Soul, Rex?
I really like the song. And, you know, I don't really have a lot to say about that. I'm sure you do, but it's it's probably talking about marriage and two people being one, right?
Yep. My take from it, my impression, it's talking about a marriage struggling with the male figure declaring he's not throwing in the towel. He is one who is willing to fight to make the marriage work. The lyrics read, some of them, this time we've got to stick together. Can't let our hearts turn into stone. We'll win this fight if we never say never as two bodies, one mind, one soul. And Rex, that right there, two bodies, one mind, one soul, guess what? That's based on a biblical principle as found in Mark 10, 7 through 9, and Ephesians 5:31. It talks about in, you know, holy union between man and woman, the two shall become one.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a biblical principle.
So there you go again, where lyrics aren't exactly saying, you know, Jesus God, but having biblical principles in them that, you know, still get the point across. And you know, people struggle in marriages and that. So, and they would know that, you know, especially at that time, they've said that their marriages were suffering. So, you know, another, I feel, good song lyrically with all of that, talking about that, but not having the quote key words that people might be looking for.
Right. And you know what, Rex, that I had written this down today, right now is the best time to say this. You know, Rex, I am a Christian. I am a Christ follower. There are two books in the Bible, Esther and the Song of Solomon, or some would say Song of Songs. Those two books of the Bible, whole books, they don't even mention God. Does that make them unchristian? No. No, they are based upon biblical principles, godly principles and commands in conjunction with what God says. Proverbs. There's a lot of Proverbs. If you read each proverb, there's a lot of Proverbs which don't mention the Lord. So I don't know what people's problem is with this album when you examine the lyrics and what's being said. So I just want to mention, friends out there, if you got a problem with this album and you're a Christian and your problem is not musically, but it's lyrically, and your problem is that it's not musically, but lyrically, I invite you to open up your Bible to the book of Esther and Song of Solomon and begin reading. Anyway, all that's God's word. So, moving right along, Rex, that's two bodies, one mind, one soul. How about Not That Kind of Guy? What do you think, buddy?
It goes along with the Two-Time Woman song lyrically. Again, and you know, I think, you know, that's really good, you know, talking about infidelity and, you know, having an affair, whatever you want to call it. They're, again, standing up for what's right. I mean, even though you know, we're not using, you know, words that maybe people are looking for, or some people are looking for, but definitely, you know, the right kind of song lyrically that you would want to, you know, write with, you know, relationships and whatnot.
Sure. So Not That Kind of Guy, Rex, just picking up with what you were saying, you know, it's about a man thwarting off the advances of a loose woman. Some of the lyrics read, I don't give my love away for free, so baby, don't you throw yourself at me. When I say no way, you ask me why. Can't you see I'm not that kind of guy? I would love to take your hand, but I don't need no one night stand. That right there, I would love to take your hand. That's talking about taking your hand in marriage. But I don't need no one night stand. My gosh. That's based on another biblical principle. 1 Corinthians 6:16. It speaks about what happens when a man joins himself with a prostitute. How gnarly it is and why. The Bible talks about that in 1 Corinthians 6:16, and that's what this is saying, man. So anyway, great song. And yes, this is the one song that just instantly reminded me of Van Halen, but I still love it. It's still fun. I love Michael's vocal delivery in this. And Oz, yes, if he is paying homage to Eddie Van Halen, just like he does with Randy Rhoads, I mean, it's a great little homage to the band. This song kicks tush, man. I love it. All right. Shining Star Rex, it's an Earth, Wind, and Fire cover. That's all that I put about it. I thought they did a great job. I love the background horns in it.
I looked at reviews about this song, and every review that I said, they like Stryper's version better than the original. I haven't heard the original in a while. I do remember I did check it out back in the day, and I believe too that I was like, yeah, this is a way better version than Earth, Wind, and Fire's. And it was the album, that had the first cover on it. So another thing that's, different about this album, I don't know what the religious folks thought about that too. They probably were not for that either, because Earth, Wind, and Fire isn't a quote Christian band. I can see that, I'm don't know that, but it's different, and you got Randy Jackson's bass on that, which is
phenomenal.
That really stands out in the mix musically. But it's a good, fun tune to play it. It's, I like it.
Oh, yeah. It's a great tune, man. Love the horns in there. Man, Michael's vocals, my gosh. He's hitting the high notes, but he's got that gruffness. Oh, man. I love the song, dude. Thought it was great.
Yeah.
All right. Shining Star, great song. We both agree. Ordinary Man, Rex, what do you think?
Like you said, it's Van Halen-ish, but for me, it's probably my least favorite song just as a whole of the album. That's about really all I can say on it, I guess, from what I'm thinking. I guess, and that's why maybe because I don't like it, I don't have a lot to say.
I thought it was a great song. I mean, I love the intro to it. I love, you can hear Tim's bass. Do, 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 do. I can't really hit the pitch right now, but anyway, thought it was great, man. I love the backing vocals, the Oz, not Oz as in Oz Fox, but when he's singing, I am just what I am. I'm an ordinary man. Great backing, spacious backing vocals. Lyrically, man, it's about a man looking inward and dealing honestly with himself and his marriage again. A little bit of a theme there, and Michael mentioned they were struggling with marriages. He's wishing for his marriage to work out. I still love you, honey. Please don't set me free. Some of the lyrics go, and I'll always love you, honey. Please come back to me. It's good stuff, man, wanting your marriage to work. Okay, lady, Rex, what do you think?
Yeah, it's the ballad on the album. I love this song. I know they did a video for it. I haven't seen the video in ages. I probably should have looked at that. But it's another one of those, you know, guys just talking about his love for you know, his lady or his wife or whatever. I think it's a great one of their better ballads, just in general. I know Michael does it sometimes from time to time when he does some solo things, I think, still. So that kind of tells you what he thinks about it. I know a lot of people like the song as a whole. Like I said, I thought it was a very, very good ballad for them.
I agree, man. It's a pure love song, devoid of sexual innuendos lyrically. It's just about a man seeking to win over a lady's heart. I mean, that's my take anyway. Great song, man. It's a power ballad done right. I fell in love with the song the very first time I heard it. It instantly became, and I'm pretty fond of First Love from the Soldiers album. But when I first heard Lady, man, I'm just like, oh, this song, the cascading vocals on it. Anyway, I know I've actually talked about that in another previous episode. It's a pure love song, devoid of any sexual innuendos. Great song, man. Caught in the Middle, Rex.
Yeah, one of my favorite songs off the album, and just lyrically, you know, just talking about, you know, people struggling and which way to go, and you know, I think most people can relate to that. Like I said, not like it's one of the songs that I feel has a more stronger message, you know, about, you know, going the right way or doing, you know, the right thing or following the right path. And musically, yeah, it's up there with it's in my top 3 songs of the album probably. So
Yeah, this song smokes, man. Lyrically, just throwing some of them out there. You've been working hard trying to make your life appealing. Later on, it says, you've got no regard, don't know what the hell you're feeling. And granted, when I first heard Hell There for the first time, I was like, whoa, you know. But I understand it in context. Got everything, live like a king, how will you live tomorrow? You're caught in the middle, you don't know where to go. Turn it around, come back to the ground, you know, before you lose control. Rex, what I picked up on this song, from my perspective, it's loosely based on Revelation 3. In particular, verses 1 through 3 and 15 through 17. It's talking about, you know, got everything, live like a king, how will you live tomorrow? It's basically talking about being alive, though dead inside. Revelation 3, in those verses 1 through 3 and 15 through 17, is talking about somebody who's neither hot or cold, but they're lukewarm. And there's a warning in the verses I mentioned, that because you're neither hot or cold, it's a warning that God's about to vomit you out of his mouth, is what the Bible says. You know, Stryper's giving a warning. You're caught in the middle. You've got no regard, don't know what the hell you're feeling. You're caught in the middle, you know, and you don't know where to go. Turn it around, come back to the ground. You know, what does it say? Before you break and lose control, or before you...
yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly the words.
It's basically a warning, man.
Yeah.
Come down to earth and look at things realistically here. That was my take, loosely based on Revelation 3, about being neither hot or cold, but lukewarm, caught in the middle. Great song. All for one, buddy.
Yeah. You would have thought Michael wrote that, you know, 5 months ago instead of 30 years ago. This is my favorite song of the album musically, and lyrically another one of those positive message, you know, songs, and help people, and, you know, all for one, one for all. Isn't that the way it should be? You know, the Bible talks about that, you know, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Just, you know, show love, show concern, care for people. The world always needs that, and definitely in today's time for sure.
Yep. Is there love to be found in this world's pain and misery? Those are some of the lyrics, like you said. We would have thought Michael could have written that for this album. Um, like you said, Rex, I put a song about doing unto others and putting the other first. It's a song about loving one another. In my humble opinion, Rex, it boasts one of the greatest riffs ever
Yes.
in Stryper's canon. My gosh, that chugging, galloping riff. And then the solo.
Right from the get-go. I mean, I heard that and I was just like, whoa, that is, I just love that. Yes, that intro is, yeah, one of their best.
Yeah, it kicks Keister for certain, man. Even the vocals on that song. All for one and one for all, when you hear them, and man, they just echo and reverberate with authority. I mean, I don't know, just a great song. All right. The final song on the album, Rock the Hell Out of You. What do you think, Rex?
Well, as you and other listeners know, this is a really heavy musically song. It's just, it's not my cup of tea, and I can see why the religious people, I'm sure, jumped all over this. My friend, my best friend from college, Ron, he loves this song. I think, I get the lyrics, but it's musically, it's too rockin' for me. Maybe I'm too old now. I don't know.
So they say, we're the thundering sons, we're the undying ones. With the power of good, evil has never won. With armies from heaven, we have fought with a rage. It's all in the rhythm and the power coming from the stage. Man, this song, Rex, from its title, Stryper loves that play on the word hell.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Anyway, this song is chock full of biblical allusion. The Thundering Sons. We're the Thundering Sons. Man, in the Bible, James and John of Zebedee, that's what they were known as, the Thundering Sons. And of course, Stryper is making a play on that with their powerful music. The Undying Ones. I mean, Stryper's born again. Yes, we're all dying, but those of us who are born again will rock on into everlasting life. With the power of good, evil has never won. So right there, they are, with the power of good, evil has never won. Right there, they are shunning evil. With armies from heaven, not hell, with armies from heaven, we have fought with a rage. Anyway, Stryper is acknowledging here God's power, and they're saying that they are there as vessels through God's power to rock the literal hell out of someone. And I get it, man. So I have some summation of thoughts, and we gave our overall impression. Do you want to give a general takeaway, Rex? Because I have some thoughts that I'd like to leave with in a general takeaway.
Sure. Well, we're both on the same page about, what we think about it, and that we both think it's one of the better Stryper albums, and it actually would be my number 4 of all the Stryper discography. It falls in number 4 for me, and I can play that today, and I mean, it's right up there with anything else, their better stuff. Like you said, the message is there if you listen. The music is it's spectacular. I'm really disappointed that album did not do better. That should have just been a continuation on, from In God We Trust. I know In God We Trust, of course, sold a lot less than To Hell with the Devil, but it's just unfortunate that they couldn't take that momentum with that album for whatever reason with everything. I don't have any issues with it, and like I said, I listened to that album quite a bit actually, and I really like it. It's a great album in my opinion, no ifs, ands, or buts.
And I concur, buddy, and I appreciate it. And even if you disagree, as we say, it's all Stryper, so it's all right. I appreciate your thoughts, Rex. I really am glad you like the album. Here's my thoughts in summation. Against the Law is an audible portrait of a Christian's struggle in daily life. The main takeaway that I appreciate so much about Against the Law is its honesty. It isn't cheesy. Rex, I'm going to be honest, man. Christian-made media, and I'm speaking in a general sense here. Christian-made media, I'm talking about movies, books, music, music lyrics, etc. Though much of Christian-made media means well, the quality is often B-grade and cheesy. This Christian-made media, whatever outlet, movies, books, music lyrics, they're not brutally honest sometimes. The manuscript is often weak when it comes to setting the scene in dialogue. I'm not talking about Against the Law. I'm talking about Christian-made media in general. The manuscript is often weak when it comes to setting the scene and as far as delivering the dialogue. What I'm about to say, this doesn't make it right, but you see, Christians don't always say fiddlesticks when facing life's hardships. Sometimes other F words or other words come into play. Against the Law is an honest snapshot of a then young band of Christians struggling with the pressures of life. That's what Against the Law is to me. If one were to carefully examine the lyrics, if you've got a problem with Against the Law's lyrics, people, whoever, though the band's faith isn't worn on their sleeves, it is most certainly alluded to. And lyrically, the songs spin tales of virtue, not vice. If you want to know what something is made of, you go to the core. Rex, when I was several years ago at a Young Life meeting, it was ironically, it was in October during the Halloween time. They had a contest of among 5 people. They had wrapped up apples in caramel. They had a caramel eating apple contest, a caramel apple eating contest to see who could eat it the fastest. Okay? The crazy thing is one of those caramel apples that somebody bit into, it was a caramel wrapped onion. They were playing a joke. So here's these people getting ready to eat these 5 caramel apples, 5 people lined up. This one guy bites into it, except for it's a caramel wrapped onion. And the look on his face when he bit into that. Here's my point, Rex. When people want to know what something is truly made of, you get to the core. That guy found out it was an onion. What is at the core of Against the Law? What is it truly made of? Friends out there who are fans of Stryper, going to the core of this album, Against the Law, you see, even in Stryper's darkest hour during this time, they were still acknowledging God's precepts. Against the Law, it's an album of living, of wrestling with struggles in life. It talks of morality tales in Proverbs. Against the Law is a metal album of Proverbs, meaning precepts for living in accordance with God's word. Just like the book of Proverbs, not every proverb says God in it, but it's still about walking under the lordship of God's commands and living life accordingly. Within these songs of Against the Law, the album, there are morality tales being told. Not picking up that loose woman, about staying faithful to your wife and fighting to make your marriage work. Rex, back in 1999, forgive me if I've already shared this story. In 1999, I was headed to church in my Jeep. I played drums on the praise and worship team, so I got to church early. And I'd always pop in an album and listen to it on the way to church. Now, remember, in 99, 9 years since Stryper released Against the Law, a bit fewer than that since, what was their first greatest hits album? I have it. It has Believe on there. And
Can't Stop the
Can't
Rock.
Stop the Rock. Rex, during this time, grunge had hit, and there was all these bands that, frankly, after bands such as Stryper and bands of that nature that we listened to during that time, the 80s bands, when grunge hit, man, I started losing track of modern music. I didn't relate to grunge for a long, long time. What I had done was I was going back to other bands and bands that I had known of, but listening to old school bands for the first time, bands that I didn't pick up on the first wave. Bands like TNT, for instance, and other bands of that nature. But my point being, it had been several years since I last listened to Stryper in the late 90s. I still loved them. I was just trying to find new music, but for me, it wasn't in the grunge scene. So one day, I'm driving to church, and I had popped in the Yellow and Black Attack CD. Of course, it was the 86, the only version available. Still liked it. After years of not listening to Stryper, Stryper was never, until more recent years, back then during the classic years, if you will. Back then during the classic years, if you will, Rex, the Lord was certainly presented. I'm not sure why my camera keeps freezing now. The Lord was certainly presented, Rex, but Stryper was never a deep theological band at that time. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm trying to say is, in 1999, after years of not listening to any Stryper, I was amazed at these Christian lyrics that just popped out at me, and how much light was in those lyrics. It's almost like I kind of rediscovered Stryper at that time. And hearing those lyrics as if for the first time again, I did recall at that juncture how much crap Stryper endured from both religious people and from the mainstream. And this will sound kind of funny and stupid. I don't care. It's true. During that Sunday morning before church in 1999, when I was sitting there listening to the Yellow and Black Attack album, with all that light coming out in the lyrics, my eyes literally welled with tears, and I actually whispered an apology right there. Under my breath, I said, "I'm sorry, guys." There were times, even I was like during Against the Law, and I always loved it. Okay, guys, where are you coming from? I was, at first just a little bit. Where are you coming from, guys? Help me to navigate through this. I whispered a little apology under my breath to Stryper on that morning. I said, "I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry you took that crap." And I had tears in my eyes. I say that, Rex, because right now, what I would like for other Stryper fans to hear, and if by chance one of the guys ever comes across our little Small Potatoes fan site here, Michael, Oz, Robert, Tim, Perry, I truly am sorry for all the crap that you took from people over the years, whether they be religious or from the mainstream. You all have ministered to me in the past, and you all are ministering to me today. And I thank you. And I just wanted to publicly apologize for the stuff that you took. Unmerited junk that you took back. I think sometimes we forget, Rex, from all these religious people, and I'm not religious, I am a Christ follower. We forget that people, I love the way C.S. Lewis puts it, we're not flesh and bone that has a soul. Everybody is a soul that has flesh and bone around it. And we forget that the members of Stryper are souls just like us. They have feelings and emotion. Things hurt those guys, just like we get hurt by things. People forget that, and we're hard on people, and we shouldn't be. We should be loving. And that's been Stryper's message in every album. Thoughts on that, buddy?
Yeah, I think as fans, sometimes we don't, and I'm sure we'll never know everything, but like there's probably a lot that we don't know about that they put up with. Just, you can imagine back in the 80s, and that with secular bands, and just, they were right there in the thick of that with everything. You can imagine the ridicule they took, I'm sure, and to just keep being faithful and standing up and carrying that torch for the Lord. And that's a struggle. That, and like you said, that whole album is just like, I think them being honest, and like, as you said, hey, here's real life struggles, and here's how to handle them, and here's the way to try to deal with all that. Yeah, I don't think we really can understand everything that they've taken, and I'm sure even today there is some bias, of course, yet with them, that they'll never be able to fully escape, unfortunately, and people won't give them a chance. Our friend Lee from Iridium, he's talked about that too, several episodes, about if people would just give them a chance, and try to get past the whole Christian label thing, with that, so kudos to him too for realizing that, and not being afraid to give them a chance. And he's a huge Stryper fan, so I think that's what my thoughts are on that.
Well, man, I just think, again, quickly recapping, Stryper were still in their, if I'm not mistaken, still in their late 20s during 1990, and for being the young men then that they were, and all the pressures and heat and being under the microscope, man, I think they handled it really well as far as with the album. I mean, that album could have come out and said a really lot of nasty, blatant things if they wanted to, but they didn't. There's virtue in there. And going back to that core of, if you want to find out what something or someone is really made of, you go to the core. That was Stryper's darkest hour, and they released an album full of virtue, godly principles and precepts. The scripture closeout here, Rex, is Luke 6:45, talking about what we just mentioned. The good person produces good things from the store of good in his heart, while the evil person produces evil things from the store of evil in his heart. For his mouth speaks what overflows from his heart. So, the Stryper lyrics, Michael writes the book. Robert has always come up with some ideas. Oz, of course, usually has a couple song ideas. Like I said, I believe Not That Kind of Guy was pretty much his baby back then. What was at the core? What was coming out of their heart? The evil person brings out evil. The good person produces good things, because it says here in Luke, for his mouth speaks what overflows from his heart. That's what was at the core, all of this virtue, even in their darkest hour. I'm saying, man, that's so awesome. And thank you, Stryper. And you handled it from this fan's perspective, from my perspective, on this side of things. You handled it wonderfully. You gave us a great musical album. I'm still thankful for it to this day every time I pop it in. And I don't have to reach too far down the stack. It's in my top 5. Rex, if anybody doubts Stryper, look at where they're at today. They're renewed and recommitted to the true and living God. I really wanted to read Michael's Against the Law post as we did at the onset, because can people not see that there is an underlying theme of repentance in there? I'm not saying Michael needs to repent of anything, but what I'm saying is Michael, he is showing some remorse as far as maybe, in his opinion, the message of Christ, it bothered him that some people said, oh, I like this album because it's not a Christian album. My argument is it is a Christian album, just like the book of Esther is a Christian book of the Bible, or a book of the Bible, and Song of Solomon and many of the Proverbs, which don't mention God. But I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that Michael's saying, hey, it bothers me that some people think this way, that it's not a Christian album. Rex, I'm leaving the floor with you, buddy.
I don't know what else to say, really. But, that album, just us talking about that here today with this episode even makes me appreciate it even more. You've pointed out some things that I didn't quite think about. So even I'm getting something out of this, doing this with you, and just can appreciate it even that much more. We know personally all those guys, I think, were going through a lot of personal struggles, and we've heard some stories about they maybe weren't doing quite the things to be proud of as a Christian, and none of us are perfect. So but just to be honest about that and to share that, I think you were getting to that a lot too, and I think that's what we need to be too, is to say, hey, we're not perfect, we're trying. I think people can really appreciate that when you're getting the the real person, so to speak. So I just hope that people will think about this album some more, and just give it a chance if they've just written it off, and dive into those lyrics, and see the messages in there from the guys. So I think that's all got to say.
Hey, friends, just want to say, those of you who have been very kind to us in watching our Stryperdrive channel, just want to say again, thank you, and it means a lot. We are meeting some very nice friends along the way. We're just very appreciative. So,
Yes.
It's been great, Rex.
Yes, Kat, we'll see you later, my friend.
Okay, take care, buddy.